Hello, this is Sondra Oster, Baras, bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Beha'alotcha, and it starts out in such an atmosphere of promise. The tabernacle is up. Everybody knows what they're doing. They're preparing the last minute things they need to go into the land of Israel. In chapter 10, we have the trumpets, and then we have in chapter 10, verse 11, in the second year, on the 20th day of the second month, the cloud lifted from the tabernacle. The Israelites set out on their journeys from the wilderness of Sinai, and their march has begun, and they're about to enter the land of Israel. Okay? And we have, different ways that how it happens and all that kind of stuff. And then we have in verse 33, they marched from the mountain of the Lord a distance of 3 days. The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord traveled in front of them in that 3 days' journey to seek out a resting place for them, and the Lord's cloud kept above them by day as they moved on from camp. Okay? All is good. And then we have two verses that in the Masoretic text are, there's these funny little symbols. It's the letter Nun backwards. So it's this one symbol before verse 35 and the other one at the end of verse 36, kind of saying, putting something, it's kind of bracketing it as if to make it stand out. What do these verses say? When the ark was to set out, Moses would say, "Advance, O Lord, may your enemies be scattered, and may your foes flee before you." When it halted, he would say, "Return, O Lord, you who are Israel's myriads of thousands." This is a battle cry. This is our marching cry. Okay, and so we are all ready to march to the extent that we have here the ark is ready to travel. We know what Moses is about to say. This is what's going to happen. And then chapter 11. What happens in chapter 11? Everything falls apart. It begins with complaints. The nation complains. Now, and we have a series of complaints, and we go from here on down. Starting here at chapter 11, we're going to have a series of complaints, of sins, of all kinds of problems. And the first says as follows: the people took to complaining bitterly before the Lord. We have no idea what they're complaining about. Later on, we're going to have different kinds of complaints. Later, just a few verses later, they're going to complain because they want meat, and they're going to be missing the fish and watermelons and all kinds of stuff that they had in Egypt. But here, this first sin is a complaint, and we don't even know what they're complaining about. Okay? So we have this sense of the beginning complaining for no reason we don't know. It's a restlessness. It's a sense of dissatisfaction. It's almost as if the issue of the complaint is not what's important. And it seems that the beginning of chapter 11 is really to tell us that. Don't pay attention to what they're complaining about. Pay attention to the fact that they're just complaining. They're not satisfied. What is going on here? And then we have Moses, after the second complaint, he gets very upset. And he says, he turns to God. And he says, basically he says, "Get me out of here." He says, "Did I conceive these people? Did I bear them that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries an infant?" And he says, "Where am I to get meat?" He says, leave. I didn't ask for this job. What is this for? And he then, of course, says, "I cannot carry these people by myself. It is too much for me." And he's asking God to relieve him of this burden. And the answer that God gives him is to gather around 70 elders, and they will assist. Part of his spirit will go on them, and he will assist them. Okay? Basically, the way Moses responds to these earlier complaints is that it is a challenge to his leadership, and he is not up for the challenge. And as we can see, as we move further on, this becomes the basic problem, a challenge to Moses' leadership, the restlessness in the nation, the unwillingness to listen to what Moses is telling them to do. They are challenging his leadership. Here he is, this man who took them out of Egypt, who was God's direct messenger, and they look at him and they listen to him, and they followed him out of Egypt, and they followed him across the Red Sea, and they followed him into the wilderness, and they, he's looking after him, he's taking care of him, and we're really only here now in the second year. It hasn't been such a long time, and yet you already have a sense something has cracked. They are not as able or willing to just trust and accept his leadership. And of course, at the end of the chapter, we have the story about Aaron and Miriam talking about Moses, talking about a wife. He has this Cushi woman, an Egyptian woman, or a, not clear what this Ethiopian, something. It's not exactly clear what it is about. But one of the most important things that comes out of this, when God calls Aaron and Miriam to task, and he criticizes them for what they have done, he says to them, "How did you not fear to speak against my servant Moses?" And in that sense, he's also hitting the nail. And of course, one of their complaints is, "We're also prophets. Why is he such a special prophet? Why me?" And in both of these types of things where God is kind of hitting the nail on the head and saying, why aren't you afraid to talk against Moses? If you accepted his leadership, you wouldn't be afraid to talk against. You would be afraid to talk against him. Why are you contesting his leadership? You think you're as good a prophet? Well, Moses is a cut above them in prophecy, which is what God, of course, has to remind them of. But we're in this atmosphere of there's a problem here. And of course, what ends up happening, in next week's Torah portion, we talk about the spies, where the very idea of going into the land that Moses has said to them all along, God is taking you to a land, he's going to take you to his wonderful land. Look what God is giving you. Isn't it wonderful? And they don't trust that. And it's not just that they don't believe in God. They don't trust what Moses is saying. They're challenging his leadership. They want to see it for themselves. They have all these leaders going out. They want to see it from themselves. And I think this is really the key to understanding what starts happening in chapter 11 and continues until the end of Moses' life. From this point on, Moses' leadership is being challenged on a regular basis by this generation, by the next generation. And it is not for nothing. The Bible calls the nation of Israel a stiff-necked people. It's not a people that is easy to govern. Even someone as great and as special as Moses, he manages to hold their admiration for less than 2 years. And then things start to deteriorate. And I think the root of all this deterioration, beyond any lack of faith in God, is a lack of trust in Moses' leadership. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom. I hope you enjoyed that film. And we have lots more film content and emails and articles that I'm sure you will enjoy as well. Check out our website at CFOIC.com and subscribe to our newsletter. You can do that right from the homepage. I know you will really enjoy the content that will land in your inbox on a regular basis. Hope to see you soon.